Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We are going to talk about the Agile evolution, redefining the PMO role. My name is Marisa Silva, and I'm going to be your host for today. I'm quite excited to talk to you about how the PMO is evolving in a world where organizations are also shifting more and more towards Agile. So today we are going to explore what that means specifically for the role of the PMO. But before we do that, just a quick introduction about myself, and then I'll switch my camera off so that I can focus fully on the content. I'm Marisa Silva, as mentioned. I'm a senior consultant at Wellingtone. I've been with Wellingtone for nearly 10 years now. So co-author of the Prince 2 latest edition, the 7th edition, also a fellow member of the Association for Project Management, and I'm the co-author for the APM accredited PMO practitioner and PMO leader courses at Wellingtone. But enough about me. Let's then talk about Agile and the role of the PMOs. Well, first of all, let me ask you a question to get us started. On the screen, you can see our agenda, so how we are going to talk about the functions, Agile principles, moving from the process-driven to value-driven PMOs and the future of PMOs. But my question is, when thinking of PMOs, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Probably, if you are working in a PMO or passionate about PMOs as I am, you'll think about the PMO as a driver of maturity, an enabler, best practice expert, all of those. However, I'm afraid that if we ask someone else, it's likely that the first thing that they will think about is that the PMO is a rigid, bureaucratic, controlling function. Fortunately, the good thing is that I think that's just a perception. And we together need to change that perception and should be able to change that perception if we also evolve in our PMOs. So that's indeed what we are going to explore today, how the PMO role is being reshaped by the Agile principles and practices, and how does that align with the functions that we currently see in PMOs. Together, we are also going to see how to move away from that perhaps obsolete view around PMOs and how we can have a focus on being more adaptable and delivering real value. So being value-driven rather than process-driven. Finally, we'll also see how the future of PMOs could look like. So for that, first of all, let's take a step back and look at the broader picture on why do we need the PMO to evolve. I would say that the business environment, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, is moving faster than ever, being because of emerging technologies, global disruptions, just customer expectations. I think we all can agree that long-term planning no longer works, at least one that is static, that is not dynamic, continuously evolving. In response to that, organizations are adopting more and more Agile as their delivery approach, as a framework. And this is no longer just in IT or software development, but even across the entire company. Because it's focused on speed, adaptability, empowering teams, and those are, of course, all key words that appeal to us. So where does that lead the PMO? Are we pulling to different sides? Are we opposites, as you can see there on the screen? Well, let's see some of the characteristics that are typically associated with PMO teams and Agile teams. And again, they may just be a perception, but in simplest, pure form, this is how we usually understand those teams. So the PMO one that is very much focused on predictability, ensuring that if we focus this approach, if we continue in this trajectory, this is what we can expect on the project. While for Agile teams, the focus would be on innovation, experimenting rather than trying to mitigate and minimize the number of changes that we'll have on the project. For PMO, for instance, we are very much focused on, or obsessed perhaps, with processes, while in the Agile teams, we are looking into the flow of those activities and using the team as self-organizing decision-making team. Then from the PMO, the focus is very much one of being highly bureaucratic, focused on stage gates, ensuring that we are compliant with processes. For Agile, on the other hand, What we want to focus on is on continuous development in a way that we are satisfying the needs of our customers or what they perceive to be real value delivered. So on one hand, we have the PMO with standardization of processes, mountains of reports sometimes, and this idea of command and control, while in Agile, this traditional view of the PMO and traditional in commons, as I mentioned, it may be a perception, but it's still very much one that is present in many organizations. What happens is that that role can stifle progress, can actually hinder that creation of value. It may be seen as a blocker to the world or to the work of the Agile teams. However, I think that's the good news is that the PMO just needs to evolve. So it just needs to transform, just needs to accommodate that new perspective. So let's see some of the challenges now that are faced by that traditional view of the PMO. So on the screen, you can see some of those, like for instance, how do we cope with less precise business cases? Now that we have Agile as a way of working, and as you know, Agile in its pure form, in Agile, we are not aware yet of what the scope is, so we'll need to identify what scope fits within a time box, within that amount of money that we have been given. So how are we able to contract with a supplier or to have a business case where that scope definition is missing? How can we prioritize projects if we are not aware of what that scope looks like or what are the benefits that are going to be associated with it? And how can we recognize if an Agile project or managed in an Agile way is going wrong? If the Agile teams are not using the same reporting formats, the same reporting tools, when they are not producing exception reports or highlight reports, but instead are making decisions on their own as an empowered and self-organizing team. Well, I would say that those are false questions, that are losing the focus of where we should be looking at. Why? Because as we are going to see shortly, what we need to consider is what are the common grounds. What are the objectives, the strategic objectives, that regardless of the delivery approach, we still aim to meet. In addition to that, thinking about the PMO as an entity on its own, we also have the challenges of resistance to change. So where the Agile teams might see the PMO as a barrier to agility rather than an enabler of it. And if we are totally honest, sometimes that perception, I think we could say, is earned. It can see that you are too attached to obsessed with those old ways of working, where we are not looking into what are the latest trends, when we are not able to adapt and to use the Agile principles ourselves. And the other one is a challenge around how to adapt governance and reporting. And by association, balancing control and flexibility as they go hand in hand. So how do we ensure that we have sufficient scrutiny on the Agile projects, but without interfering with the work of the teams? How can we ensure that we have just enough governance? So still seeing how that project is being managed, ensuring that it's leading to a successful completion, but at the same time, where we don't want to overwhelm people, where we don't want to kill the joy of working on that project because of the level of control and bureaucracy. So for that, what we strongly recommend is the idea of minimum viable bureaucracy, just enough. The trick is in understanding how to get to that minimum viable bureaucracy. So it will depend on the project type, the level of complexity of risk, etc. But have a look into the guidance issued by Wellingtone as well. We have some articles on this topic that can be of help. So identifying what is that balance that would allow us to, or prevent us from getting to what you can now see on the screen, a situation where just mixing different approaches without any consideration of what is appropriate for the project. Working in a PMO means also being an advisor on what good looks like and what should be the delivery approach that makes sense for the characteristics and the nature of the project. So what we want to do is move from process-driven to being a value-driven PMO. That is the new role that we should take in Agile. Often there is a misalignment between what is the goals of the organization, the strategic goals, and also what is the execution. The reason for it is because we are too focused on the compliance to the process, the governance needed as a rigid structure, rather than on providing strategic guidance. As I was saying, we should be advisors. So based on the level of risk, based on the fact that the requirements for this project are uncertain, then this would suit an Agile delivery approach. If we have certain requirements, if our stakeholders are ready or are used to a more stable, predictive type of delivery, then this would suit perhaps a Prince 2 oriented approach. So we should be able to provide a toolkit and based on the toolkit advise what is the right tool for the context that we are faced with. Because at the end of the day, project management is contextual. Let's not forget that. Then we should also move from process to outcomes. I've been saying that sometimes we are indeed too focused on processes and on the outputs, so obsessing over how many projects are completed or how the teams are adhering to the process. Instead, we should be focusing shifting our focus to what are measurable business results, to what are the outcomes, not the outputs. So what is that we want to achieve at the end of the day? Ultimately, the process is just a means to an end. So the outcome, the practice of it, is what the PMOs should be concerned with. The other point is about moving from control to collaboration. We should be instruments of integration in the organization. We should be connectors, enablers, strategic partners that build that build bridges between the different teams. After all, we bring stuff together: processes, teams, knowledge, lessons. So aiming to break those silos and to being that integrator is key. But still with the view that you want to have just enough structure to prevent chaos, but also without stopping innovation happening. And the other point that I want to make on this new role of the PMO in Agile is that we should be supporting the Agile teams. Let's not forget that we are a service in the organization. Therefore, we should work as servant leaders to those teams. This can mean, for instance, providing coaching on what the Agile methodologies look like. I'm not suggesting that we all need to become Scrum Masters all of a sudden, but indeed, by having that knowledge, we are in a better position to advise, as we have that helicopter view of what the portfolio of projects looks like in the organization. We can also bridge the gap between the business and the technical teams by being that instrument of integration, facilitating communication between them. And then offering tools and frameworks for scaling Agile, or even bringing that understanding to the business, the ones making decisions, the project boards, for instance, on what good looks like for Agile. Not WAGILE, not Agile, but indeed agility, as being able to adapt. And if that involves using Agile methodologies as your delivery approach, that would be still a means to an end. The ultimate goal is in value being delivered. That means that we are also changing the position of the PMO in that organization. Rather than demanding, which is something that we are really good at, requesting information from others. So I need a status report by Friday. Here are the tools that you need to use. You must follow the methodology. Why are you not completing this change request? So a computer says no type of approach where the PMO is the center of that world, almost as an elitistic club. Rather than looking inwards, what we should be doing is being radiators of information, positioning ourselves as a critical friend that works as a servant leader. So instead, let's use different focus, different questions. Let's think about engagement. Are our clients happy? And note the word clients, not stakeholders, because as I mentioned, PMO is a service to be provided. And if our clients are not happy, they will disengage as they do it with any other service. Are we doing the right projects? Are we focusing on those outcomes or too obsessed with the outputs and processes? Have we achieved the objectives or not? And this would also include if this project is the right one to be done, as it contributes or not to the strategic objectives of the organization. And finally, but for me, perhaps even the most important of them all, position the PMO as a real supporting function. How can the PMO help you? Because we are there to serve, not what we need from the project teams, including the Agile teams, but how can the PMO help them? So that should be our mindset. So let's now see the future of PMO, so how to successfully transition to that new world. So some steps to help redefine your PMO for the Agile era. Of course, what you can now see on the screen are not those right steps. This is just a provocative thought, because unfortunately, that is sometimes what we still see in organizations. Where Agile is introduced, people just think that they no longer need the PMO. Actually we do. We just need to reposition it, to evolve it. The other approach is sometimes just changing the PMO name. Let's now market it as Agile PMO. I'm sorry to inform you, but no, that doesn't work. Doesn't matter the name, it matters how you are supporting those teams, what you are doing as part of your service catalog, and how effective your services are being delivered, of course. Or just get on with it, you'll be fine, without giving any support to the PMO to become relevant, to learn, to gain that knowledge about what Agile is about. So you also need to upskill, and that requires time. So it's not just a matter of relying on luck for that to happen. There needs to be a supporting environment for the PMOs to successfully transition. Some actionable steps now, real ones that you can take. So the first one would be about finding those common grounds. Regardless of the delivery approach that you are taking, we all work towards the same objective. And that should be meeting the strategic objectives of the organization as defined by the management team. So this would be about increasing sales, it could be about increasing satisfaction of your customers, satisfaction of staff, etc. But ultimately, that is what we want to achieve. So it doesn't matter if the scope is not fully defined or not, or what is the delivery approach. Let's go back to what are the outcomes, the value to be delivered. And talking about value, the other thing that you can do is understanding the PMO value lifecycle. So that means that we want to understand what is perceived as value by our customers, in our case, by the Agile team. What are the pain points that they are experiencing? Sometimes people are not able to articulate what do they need from the PMO. But if they tell us what are the challenges that they are experiencing, we are then able to translate those into services. In fact, that would be the second step in the PMO value lifecycle. So once we capture that perception of value, let's then build a service catalog that allow us to deliver value to those expectations. The third step would be about measuring the value being delivered, exactly as we ask our project teams to do. So show us how you are performing. The same logic should apply to the PMO if we are to be trusted, to be credible. And also to confirm that we are indeed meeting that roadmap. And the last step would be about communicating that value is being delivered. Sometimes we may even be doing what we are supposed to be doing in the PMO, but we are isolated, we don't communicate, we don't share. So that means that sometimes people don't even know what the PMO is doing. Of course, if we don't contribute to the bottom line of our projects, this can make it a bit of a hard sell. So therefore, by showing how you are supporting the projects, how are you delivering value, then you are able to gain that buy-in from your customers. Changing your perspective. So from shifting from command and control to being that servant leader. As we're seeing before, adopting that position where we are radiators of insights, of information, rather than just demanding from others. Applying just enough governance. We are in a great position to advise on what this looks like. So identifying what our minimum viable bureaucracy is would be key. Because if you are doing a simple project, low level of complexity, low level of risk, something that you have similar scope to what you have done before. Of course, we don't want to kill the joy of working on that project with too much controls and bureaucracy. 10 governance bodies to go for and this amount of reports to produce. So we need to tailor our approach. A picture is worth 1,000 words. In Agile, visuals are quite popular. Sometimes what we are missing is visibility in our organizations. So the PMO is in a great position to be that single source of truth. And using visuals to support that message is highly advisable. Being the Agile team's best friend forever. So we want to ensure that people working in Agile, so in those Agile teams, are seeing us as collaborators, as helpers, rather than as blockers. So that means that by asking the question, how can we help? We are able to then support the view of Agile in the organization by proposing a certain toolkit, by providing coaching on Agile, or simply by being the bridge between the Agile teams and the business. So different approaches that we can take to be that best friend. Building a fail-friendly environment. For me, this is also a big one. We need to foster a culture of continuous learning. After all, Agile is all about experimentation, failing fast, and using the different iterations to learn. So by building that fail-friendly environment, the PMO can provide a safe space for teams to try new approaches without feeling like there are going to be consequences about it. So without that fear of repercussions. Ultimately, PMOs should support the learning organization. So that is indeed about our role as enablers of that environment. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about managing projects. It's also about managing for projects. So building that environment would be key to that. And finally, let's test it ourselves. So if the Agile teams are doing daily stand-ups, using task boards, why don't we in the PMO use that same approach? So asking every day on the team what has been achieved, what's planned for that day, are there any obstacles that will need to be removed? So this would help to build buy-in, to show that we are walking the talk, that we understand the challenges that may be experienced, but also it helps us to be the change agent, to lead that change, to champion it and show that we too are embracing the Agile mindset. So for me, the future of PMOs is all about trying to understand how we can make it a good one through the delivery of value. That's the thought that I want to leave with you. It doesn't matter what delivery approach you are using. As you can see on that cartoon, we are using Agile, but we are still underperforming. That's not good enough. We need to deliver value. So the Agile evolution of the PMO isn't just about surviving. It's about thriving. It's about enabling Agile. That's what we want to do. By redefining its role, we can then become the backbone of that organizational agility. driving change that is meaningful and delivering real value that is perceived as such, not just by the Agile teams, but ultimately by the organization and our customers. And with that thought, my question for you is, what's your next step? Based on what we have heard, how can you start rethinking your PMO today? Thank you very much. And we will now support the webinar with an article where you can find more information to guide your transition to that hopefully successful future of the PMO. Thank you all.